Minister, since I went to the west of Ireland many years ago and found out about the means testing system, I have to say that I've always believed it is penal. And we often talk about how the tax system can act as a disincentive to worker savings. But I think it's fair to admit too that the social welfare system actually does that more. I'm going to give you one example. For example, for most working age means tested payments, with the exception of disability allowance, and we'll talk about that under question 28, any income over, any savings over €40,000 are considered as if they generated an income of 20% per annum.
Thanks, Deputy Minister.
Thank you, Deputy, for raising this matter. I understand that your question is seeking my views on whether the weekly payment rates for schemes such as Community Employment, Rural Social Scheme and TUS represent a fair and adequate incentive to a married person to participate in the schemes. My department provides a range of social employment and training programmes that are targeted at long-term unemployed job seekers and those most distant from the labour market. These supports include the Community Employment, TUS and the Rural Social Schemes. The Rural Social Scheme provides local employment opportunities for low-income farmers and fishermen. And I know that Deputy Ó Cuív is very familiar with the Rural Social and the TUS schemes, as you designed them and you introduced them as Minister for Community, Rural and Gaeltacht Affairs. And I commend you on that initiative, and I'm very aware of the benefits of these schemes and the benefits they bring to communities throughout Ireland, and indeed in particular our rural communities. The respective aims of the Community Employment Programme and the Rural Social and TUS schemes are to enhance the employability of disadvantaged and unemployed people by providing work experience and training opportunities for participants. The payment rates for participants on these schemes are based on the underlying value of their social protection payment, plus an additional payment of €22.50 per week, with a minimum payment to each participant of €225.50 per week. In addition, a participant may be eligible for additional weekly payments in respect of any qualified dependent adult and each dependent child, depending on the household composition and means. Rural Social Scheme participants work 19.5 hours per week, and the agreed hours are based on a farmer fisher friendly schedule, and this is to ensure that participation on the scheme does not adversely affect normal farming or fishing activity. Participants participating on employment support schemes such as CE and RSS also provides participants with an opportunity to pursue additional employment outside of the 19.5 hours required of the schemes. In the case of the Rural Social Scheme in particular, it should be noted that scheme participants have other income from self-employment as farmers or fishermen.
Thanks, Minister. Deputy.
Minister, I think if you look at question 25, you'll see that it covers all means testing of social welfare schemes, community employment schemes and the RSS scheme. So, Minister, I presume you're aware that if you're on, for example, job seekers allowance and you have a self-employed income other than farming, they means test that self-employed income at 100%. In other words, if you earn €30 a week self-employed, you lose €30 a week from your job seekers allowance. And then in the case of farmers, with the exception of the environmental schemes, for every €100 you earn, they take €70 back. Now, the top tax earners in the country aren't penalised like that. Minister, can I ask you, do you think that's fair? And is it about time that we looked at this again and brought in a much fairer system for people who have small self-employed incomes and farms?
Thanks, Deputy Ó Cuív. Minister.
Thank you. Deputy, I'm happy to sit down with you and talk to you about these particular schemes. They are good schemes, and can I say that if we do need to make improvements, I want to hear about them, and I will sit down with you and my officials to take a look at this, because I want the system to help people, and I want it to be fair, and I don't want to see people disadvantaged, and we want to see that it is equitable. So I'm happy to sit down with you over in the time ahead, and hear how you feel it can be improved upon.
Yeah, open door for you, Deputy.
I'd like to thank the Minister for the very positive response. Now, Minister, in your standard reply, you implied that the RSS is an activation scheme to help people get employment. That's certainly not the way the scheme was designed. The scheme was designed as a supplementary income scheme in return for a huge contribution to services in local parishes up and down the country by small farmers to supplement their income. And it has been very successful in that. Now, up until John Burton became Minister of Social Protection, people on the Rural Social Scheme were entitled to the full basic entitlement. In other words, there was no penalty for having a farm, because by definition all of them had a farm. Now we have a situation that we expect people to give 19.5 hours work per week for the generous sum of €22.50. Now, this is not an activation scheme, it's a work scheme. Do you think that a rate of just over €1 an hour is recompense for the high quality work being done by these workers? And will you also talk to me about this when we have our meeting, because I'd like to go through it and the idea of this scheme and why it definitely was not an activation scheme, it was a work scheme in return for an income.
Another door for you, Minister.
Thank you. Well, Deputy, you and I have worked on a number of issues in the past, and we got very, very satisfactory resolutions. So I'm very happy to sit down and go through these schemes with you, because I'm sure that you'll be able to give me some really valuable information. And as I said, I want to work with people, to look at things and to improve them where we can.